Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sibme Coach Replay Show. I'm your host, Corey Camp, and today I am extremely excited to have one of my new friends, Don Perras, on the show. Don's a retired professor of special education at Southern Connecticut State University, New Haven, plus an independent consultant since the 70s. He specializes in differentiated instruction, classroom management practices, especially secondary grades, has coached thousands of educators and hundreds of schools and agencies, really looking at our beginning staff, and has conducted several workshops and webinars on teacher mental health, which is our topic for today. So, Don, welcome to the Coach Replay Show.
Hello, Corey, and thank you for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Yeah, and you and I have had several conversations, which is why I asked you to join us on the show about teacher mental health. It's definitely something that as coaches, we need to be aware of. And many of the coaches I've talked with are definitely aware of the mental strain and stress teachers are going through, especially this year. So today we're going to talk about how, as coaches, we can identify and support teachers' mental health. So, yeah.
Corey, just as a quick intro, starting in 2016, after doing years and years of consultation and training, I noticed a lot of the newer teachers I worked with seemed to keep repeating that message that everything was stressful, difficult, etc., particularly if they had behavior problems in their classrooms. So from that point till today, I've done some workshops, done a lot of personalized coaching and webinars. So even in the last 3 to 4 years, this has suddenly become a very, very critical topic, even within the context of what I've been doing in Connecticut.
Yeah. And, looking back at like new teacher project research, I had an episode with my colleague, TJ Hoffman. We talked about Devulsin. I'm sure you've heard of that. The dark, evil vortex of late September, October, November.
Oh, absolutely.
It really is that, and it's a very real phenomenon that especially new teachers struggle with as they get going. Like the honeymoon period wears off very quickly after the first few days, and classroom management issues start to take over their lessons. And but add what we have here in 2020, which, let's just be frank, 2020 is not at all what we imagined. This pandemic is. And these less than ideal teaching situations are the way that we're having to confront them is the source of a lot of anxiety and stress for teachers.
Oh, true.
So in your work, especially thinking about these last few months, can you tell us what you've noticed in your work regarding the impact of the pandemic on teacher mental health?
Why don't we look at slide 3? I think that'll help us get conversation started. Now this is a compilation of research that I've been studying besides my own experience out in the field. And again, this is just a simplistic overview, but I think it might alert coaches and or the teachers themselves to certain factors that are really impacting that mental health issue. So even on a simplistic level of discussion, I think these 5 or 6 points represent pretty much the whole canvas of the United States. And the research indicates that. So this is not something based on a region or a community or an area. So even thinking of your location, I'm in Connecticut, I think any teachers I've been associated with certainly would represent these stressors. I think particularly the second one down in blue, I'm seeing more and more students entering schools that have not mastered a lot of what I call readiness. Language issues, as you can see here, the ability to reason, particularly socialization, just learning to cooperate, share, engage with peers. All of that is producing a lot of anxiety in some classrooms.
Right. It's so much more than just content for us as educators.
Absolutely.
We've got social emotional learning and all of the behavioral aspects that are become more and more prominent, diversity and equity issues as well in classrooms that we're trying to do it all. So
yeah, we certainly are. Just to prove a point, in Connecticut, surprisingly, we're a very wealthy state. Roughly 50% of the students in our state require financial support with lunches and so forth and so on. So even in a wealthy area that I represent, there's a staggering number of kids coming to school with trauma, all kinds of negative life experiences, not having adequate parenting and rules and responsibilities, which then gets translated into the slide that we're looking at this moment. I just wanted to reference that behavior management. I'd be curious your thoughts on this as well. This is my absolute expertise. This is what I've done since the university, as well as in my consultation. First, I would say, unfortunately, young teachers do not have adequate training to manage disruptive behavior. And I think the veterans have the opposite effect. They're relying on their traditional strategies, which to me, unfortunately, don't seem to have the same effect that they did 5 or 10 years ago, which is an indicator of why we're doing this session. So if you think about it, all of this is kind of like funneling into what comes next. You see that issue with teacher training, though, just in general?
I do. And behavior was an area I supported a lot as well when I was at a regional service center. And in special education, you and I have some parallels in our careers. And behavior is hard because when we're coaching around classroom management and supporting teachers and helping to manage and support effective student behaviors, it's highly personalized. But usually by the time we as coaches need to step in,
Absolutely.
they feel like this is and I remember feeling this sometimes about some of the students where I struggled with finding the right method for behavior management to support them in their learning. Sometimes it felt like it was an individual attack, like this student just doesn't like me, and they won't listen to anything that I'm trying to do, and I have no idea how to get through them. And it really digs at us as educators at a very personal level, and so that's hard. And it's a big topic right now when we're thinking about how do we manage behavior in hybrid and online and socially distanced, right? My 3 kids started kindergarten last week, or not 3 kids started kindergarten. I did not have triplets. Right. Thank goodness. I have 3. I talk about my kids a lot. So those who are not first-time listeners know that I've got this year, they started online kindergarten with my youngest. My middle is in 3rd grade, and my oldest is in 5th grade. And the first week of online kindergarten, my kindergartner was really excited, did great on the first day. And she just has morning kindergarten, which pretty much consists of a live Zoom meeting at 9 and then another one at 11. And then she may be pulled for small groups. Everything else is flipped for her and some online activities. But the new wore off by day 3, and she's like getting up to go get herself a snack out of the kitchen in the middle of a teacher lesson. I'm like, no, you can't just get up and walk away when Miss Gibbs is talking. And we need to do our next, it's time to do our calendar video. And she's like, all the eye rolls. She's very much a teenager in her little 5-year-old body.
5-year-old body, yeah.
But I mean, this is, and I think the kindergartner teacher her teacher's done a really good job at talking about expected and unexpected behaviors and helping students identify awareness behaviors on when they're in like the green zone and ready to learn. But then, she's not physically with the children and in front of the children to be able to help reinforce. And so it is definitely something that many, many teachers are trying to figure out. How do I keep my kids engaged? How do I promote strong learning behaviors? And how do I go about managing those behaviors one way or another? So definitely a topic.
Yeah, and thinking about this year, just to follow your example, this is pretty uncharted territory, honestly. Yeah. Even if you've got kind of natural management skills, if Johnny's at home and you're live in a school, that's a whole different dynamic. You're going to need to have engaging lessons, a lot of drama and excitement on the web, and most of all, credibility, which is a word I use a lot. If you're credible, kids will generally respond. If you don't have
Student
that
choice
kind
and
of
voice, credibility.
absolutely. And if you're not a naturally dynamic, high energy person, I think we're going to see an increase in these issues. I bet it's going to be somewhere about the end of September, as you said, the honeymoon phase.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's all going to become a reality, particularly if it's going to continue for a long block of time.
Yeah.
In fact, if we go to the next slide, which is a perfect connection.
Mm-hmm.
If you,
You have to click on that. You have to click on that on your end, Don.
I'm sorry. Hang on.
There we
Learning
go.
all these procedures. Bear with me. I'll get it right. There we go. And we talked about this just briefly before becoming online. Now we're going to add an absolute unknown. What is the effect of the coronavirus on all of the above? And if the readers just scan the 4 points here, if you look at the item in the green, nothing like this has occurred in the public arena since the 1940s. Yes, which is a while back. And now the bottom line in the kind of maroon, we need a whole training repertoire to help people cope with the inevitable. Even if this is for a short duration of time, it's still going to be a completely different scenario. I have a little empathy for the new teachers coming in. They're going to be tech savvy, but that's not the same as managing the scenario that we just described in the prior slide.
Yeah, transferring our pedagogical skills and what works best for a new setting for our online learners and doing we still doing the same thing, right? We still have the same responsibilities to provide engaging lessons, to move children forward, to have all of those things as part of what we do. It's just happening in a new setting, which sometimes doesn't make a huge change for us. It's still about making connections. It's still about being there for our students. But then in other areas, it is a dramatic shift and a complete redesign. So then, Don, I want to jump into another question. How does all of this stress, regardless of whether it's stemming from the coronavirus or how we're working in our new environments or anything else, maybe it's not at all related to our jobs, but we're under a lot of stress. How does that impact our abilities as professionals?
I'm going to go to the next slide because I think that kind of puts some perspective to it. Obviously, this is, again, going to be a broad presentation on that, but I thought we could look at 3 points that connect to the coronavirus in particular. Can you see all right there? Everything's...
I can, yeah.
All right. So if you consider a traditional instructional format, which has been in place for eons, particularly for the veterans, obviously, now 3 things are going to be radically different, which I believe are going to have profound impact on teachers' skills first, then their emotional and psychological composure. So think of the first point. We no longer are going to have the same interpersonal bonding with students. Why do people enter the profession? That has to be one of their primary motivations, correct? They enjoy spending time with children. I would have to say, if it were me, particularly at the elementary level, because of their kind of response to authority and so on. But imagine now that you're going to go to distant learning. No matter how skilled you are, it just you can't replace the bonding and the emotional connection with the students. Even with Zoom and phone conversations and Zoom Meet, I just don't think it's the same. And I know from teachers I worked with this spring, that was one of the first things they mentioned to me, and they were at the secondary level, mostly middle and high school. The next point is a little bit more of a behavioral comment. How do we respond to students who are non-compliant? Now, you've been in the business for a while. You certainly know that's a pretty substantial number of students. I'm going to say especially around the middle school level, because of their need to socialize and go through that stage of identity development. So some of the kids have learned real quickly, it's not the same as me being live in a room where you have supervision and management of me face to face. Now I'm I can resist, I can be disruptive, non-compliant, off task. So I do think that's going to create a tremendous amount of response from teachers, particularly those who, again, are not natural, engaging students. You can see that point, I'm sure, automatically, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one, let's argue that there is going to be some degree of duration to this. I know in Connecticut, some districts thinking it's going to go at least through October, November, and then possibly into 2021 if it doesn't get resolved before the new year begins. That to me adds on another dimension to this level of stress. I think you're going to see a lot of administrators struggle to cope with this part of the discussion. They're going to have to develop a whole level of different support and engagement, which we'll talk about toward the end. By the way, just as a kind of harrowing statistic, and again, this is all research-based, it's not me alone. One study I read said 60% of teachers are chronically stressed on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Not intermittent, not random, but chronic. And about 58% said because of that, they're starting to develop mental health conditions, problems, issues that require intervention. That's pretty startling if you think about it, correct?
Right. Right. Well, and I think as we think about our roles as coaches, it's thinking about, just as a teacher has to think about student social emotional learning, their mental health. We've been, a lot of studies have come out, especially recently, around trauma and growth, our ability to grow. So that we've been looking at it at the student level, but the same applies for teachers. If we're struggling with trauma from the fear and the worry of our own health, or our children's health, or the impact the job's having on us. Or, I've been quarantined for a while and I'm feeling isolated, or I really need to get some alone time from my family. All of those things really do impact us. So I have a question for you, Don. As a coach, I think it's really important that, in addition to having conversations, and many coaches that I know are not looking to really start growth coaching cycles until the end of September or October. Right now they're just that supportive role, which, as they should be, as everybody's kind of getting the new learning management system under their belt and getting students situated and all of those things. And I know in my coaching conversations, I always like to start with some connection. I'm a relator, and so I feel like I have to relate with you. How are you doing? How's it been? How's this going? Before I can get into the business conversation of coaching. And sometimes I've had teachers I'm working with that are very open, and they openly share, this is taking up all my mental capacity, or I'm so worried about this. And I have other teachers who put on a strong, bright smile and say, everything's going great. So what are some ways as coaches that we can identify that a teacher who may say they are fine isn't? What are some ways that we can do that? And then how can we be proactive in supporting teacher mental health?
Let's go to the first part. I'll show you another slide on that matter. All right, can you see that one all right?
I can, yeah.
Oops, pardon me for a second. First thing, I want to make a quick comment about everything you just said in so many words. I've done this over the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm assigned primarily to the new, early career faculty in any given location, from pre-K all the way up to 12th grade. More and more, I'm giving emotional and, pardon the term, counseling kind of support, way less than giving advice and input and feedback. And I've noticed that I would come home think, 10 years ago, if I met you, by example, I would have said, okay, Corey, here's a few ideas, consider them. I'll be back in 3 weeks and we'll continue this interaction. none of that proves true whether the teachers are superior in skill and or the most inexperienced novice. But I'm going to have to say, in summation, the younger teachers desperately want that bonding, that kind of trustingness, trustworthiness, just a feeling of emotional support. So even if we look at this list of indicators, you can see that's a pretty substantial outline of different realities that are evident of teachers having a lot of stress in their personal situation.
Yeah.
So again, just by sheer conversation, imagine you have a school of X number of teachers, and these indicators are prevalent. My goodness, this is going to ultimately affect instruction, morale, teacher performance. Just pick out anyone. Reluctance to adjust. How significant is a factor like that? You're the principal. You send out a memo. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. Let's say our 80% argumentatively will respond. Now we're going to have this cohort of people who need to be persuaded, using my word, and you can't do it using a formal punitive kind of style. This is going to come down to interaction and kind of that warm, fuzzy feeling that gets established between both sides. So some of the schools I go to, I actually get assigned to these younger teachers in particular for that exact reason, because administrators are busy. It's a hairy kind of situation with a whole lot of responsibility and not enough time or freedom to do what's necessary. Even pick the emotional, physical exhaustion. Look at teachers with high rates of absenteeism, teachers who are avoiding coming in on critical days where they have to report. And this, again, is an exploding reality. Certainly, I know in Connecticut, I've gone to schools where some teachers will have 30 days of absence and or health reasons in an entire school year.
Right.
That's extraordinary, correct?
Yeah. It absolutely is, and I think these. I love this list. So for those who are listening to us via podcast, what Don shared is inadequate preparation, incomplete assignments, reluctance to adjust, general apathy, conflicts with colleagues or parents, behavior management struggles, emotional or physical exhaustion, and chronic absences. And I do think these are. I love that you've kind of got this list, and it might start out with just, we identified some things that we'll maybe work on in our next meeting. Right. Here I am in our next meeting, and you're going, oh, I completely forgot, or I don't quite have that, or exactly, I just didn't get a chance to do that. And that happens. I mean, life happens, and it doesn't necessarily mean that teacher might be overly stressed. Maybe this was just kind of a rough week, a long week. Correct. But if you start to see that happen more and more, or I could always tell when I'm working with a teacher, if we're talking about some different ideas, and I get a lot of that won't work, that's not going to work. Yeah. I've tried that. Happens a lot with behavior coaching, and it definitely is an indicator that there's something deeper lying in that. Need to maybe put on a counseling hat, some compassionate coaching, as one of our friends, Kathy Perras, says. So, yeah, I love that. I love that you've kind of got some of these things. I think it would be, Don, I think it'd be great to have you, we're kind of at the end of our time for the show today, have you come back and talk with us about, all right, we understand this big impact on both learning and our profession, and we've identified some of the manifestations of some lacking mental health, and so now what can we do to support that? So I want to encourage our audience, if you've got a question for Don, put it in the comments below as he and I prepare to have him come back for another show to talk about some proactive ways to support teacher mental health, whether that's at the campus level or as an individual coach. Let us know what questions you have. Your takeaways today, Don, have a ton of resources. So I'm super excited for folks to find those. And remember, you can download those in the Learning Center, learn.sibme.com. Don, as we wrap up our conversation, at least this first half around teacher mental health, do you have any closing notes or anything for the audience today?
I think it's two-pronged. First, assume that it does exist. I know this sounds comical. I think a lot of districts, certainly any I've associated with, they're not giving it its just due. This is pardon the term, an epidemic. All the research indicates that you could leave here, go on anything published in 2020. It's chapter and verse about teacher mental health. So I think this is kind of a topic that's slightly below the list of priorities because of the pandemic and because of the change in instruction.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is whoever's providing the coaching, either through you or just independently in a given location, they've got to be way more nurturing, compassionate, respectful. A lot of those kinds of interactions are going to make the difference. And then I think obviously the system has to provide resources, including community-based expertise, correct?
Right, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, now is really, again, those manifestations that you shared as these indicators of stress, those can really chip away at your campus culture, psychological safety, the collective efficacy is hard to build with that. And those are things we need. We need each other. We need our communities right now. We need to lean on others. So, well, Don, this has been a great conversation. I love anytime I get a chance to talk with someone about psychology, as that was my original career path and major. And so
mine too, by the way.
Yeah, so many parallels, Don. All right. Well, we will have you back for another episode in the next couple of weeks. Audience, don't forget to give us a comment below if you've got a question for Don you'd like him to address in the next show. Be sure to download notes and takeaways, and don't forget to follow us on your preferred social media platform, or give us a like on podcasts if you're enjoying this season's episodes. Otherwise, we will see you guys next week for another episode of the Sibme Coach Replay Show. Thanks, you guys.